Eretz Hashem on 66b. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines up from the bottom. A lot to do today. So we go back to Meruach Obdei Kochavim Tanai. Supposed to remember again, we were discussing the Machlokas in Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon regarding Meruach, regarding ultimately again about the smoothing out of the pile. Remember again, at what point in time, right, regarding the smoothing out of the pile. Now we were discussing the idea, we'll say, now we're going to get into a further discussion. What happens, so what we'd established yesterday is that the Meiser obligations of grain is determined by its identity at the Shas Miruach, at the time of the smoothing out of the pile. So if you remember again, so part of the machlokus we had yesterday is because all of the Omer flour is owned, or all of the Omer grain is owned by the Beis Hamikdash at the time of Meruach, does that forever exempt it from Meiser obligation or not? So we saw that machlokus. We'll say now we go further machlokus. Meruach Ovdei Kochavim Tanaihi. We'll say what happens again if the pile is smoothed out by an akum. If the pile is smoothed out by an akum, so we'll say, so does that exempt the grain from any future meister obligations? So we'll say, so Tanahi, it's a machlokes Tanaim, this Sanya, Tarmin Mishal Yisrael Shal Yisrael. You can go ahead and we'll say, so if I have multiple piles of grain that I purchase from multiple Jews, so I could go ahead and take truma from one pile on the other pile. Similarly, if I purchase multiple piles of grain from akum, from non-Jews, from Gentiles, I can go ahead and separate out Meiser from one pile and the other pile. And I will say, well, let's define that as this. Mishal kusim al shal kusim. And I will say, if I purchased multiple piles of grain from kusim, right? Remember again, kusim were these Jews who converted, or these people who converted, whose conversion itself is always subject to dispute. Umishal al kol al shel al kol different Merad Yehuda. But Rabbi Yehuda hold that essentially all grain grown in Eretz Yisrael is always subject to Meiser. Why, Rabbi Osai? So Rashi points out that this goes back to the fundamental idea of Ein Kinyan La'akum Be'eretz Yisrael. That a non-Jew, Rabbi Osai, cannot really own real estate in Eretz Yisrael. Now what does that mean? A non-Jew can own real estate, but even if a non-Jew owns real estate, it does not take away Kedushas Haaretz. The property itself, the land itself, still has Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, which by definition means what? The produce itself is subject to all of the halachos of Trumos and Maisros. Both sides, by the way, so that's the first opinion. That has to be Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda who says, whoever you're buying the produce from, you're buying the produce from an akum, from Yisrael, from a kusi, it doesn't really matter. Produce grown in Eretz Yisrael is always subject to Trumos and Maisros. It's just that if the produce is grown by an akum and consumed by an akum, so the akum himself never has the personal obligation to separate Trumos and Maisros. But the moment that a Jew buys that produce, what? It's not Trumos and Maisros. So it tells you that even if the smoothing out of the pile, which is normally again the stage in which the Meiser identity is forged, even if the smoothing out is done by an akum, still, nevertheless, the produce itself is subject to the laws of Trumos and Maisros, because halacha lemaisa ein kinyan lenachri be'eretz Yisrael. Good. That's the first opinion. Rabbi Yossi B'Shimon Omen, Tom Mishal Yisrael Shal Yisrael. Rabbi Yossi B'Shimon say, you can go ahead and tithe. If I bought multiple piles of produce from a Jew, I could tithe one pile on the next. Umishal ovdei kochavim al shal kusim, and you could tithe. Right? You could tithe from ovdei kochavim al kusim, umishal kusim al shal ovdei kochavim, aval lo mishal Yisrael al shal ovdei kochavim. Rabbi say you can't go ahead and tithe Jewish produce on non-Jewish produce. Mishal kusim, v'lo mishal ovdei kochavim mishal kusim al shal Yisrael. So we'll say this second opinion holds that what? If you look at Rashi, Aval Mishal Yisrael, Tekasav Rabbi Shimon, Meruach ha'ovei kochavim poter, v'havile min ha'poter ala chiyuv min ha'chiyuv ala poter. So Rabbi will say, interestingly enough, for now, leaving aside the case of ovdei kochavim ala kusim and kusim ala ovdei kochavim, because it doesn't really matter so much for our purposes, but what matters for our purposes now is what? Is that halacha lemaisa, you cannot tithe Gentile produce ultimately on Jewish produce or Jewish produce on Gentile produce. Why not? Because Rabbi said this second opinion, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon hold yesh kinyan lenachri be'eretz Yisrael, and therefore again produce grown, and specifically a pile of grain smoothed by a Gentile, in fact, what is not subject to Trumos and Maisos. So we'll say what you see from here is a fundamental machlokes in Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Huda on one side, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon on the other side. Does a Nachri, does a non-Jew have the ability to truly acquire real estate in Eretz Yisrael? And by extension, not by extension, and the manifestation of that machlokes is, will the pile smoothed by an akum be subject to meiser or not? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Huda will say it is, because a Nachri does not have a kin in Eretz Yisrael, therefore the produce is subject to Trumos and Maisros. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon saying no, a Nachri does not have a kinyan, and therefore by definition the produce will not be subject to Maiser. Mosai, obviously, since we mentioned, we've quoted this machlokes a number of times. Again, the most relevant contemporary application of this particular machlokes is by heter mechira, right? Does the ability to sell property to a Gentile during the Shemitah year, does that take away kedushas shviyis or not? Shemitah produce or not? That's this very machlokes. Okay, so they're not talking about Shemitah over here. They're talking about over here the ability to go ahead and remove the obligation for meiser. Rabbi say, but the machlokes is the same, and you begin to see, by the way, why even contemporarily this is a raging machlokes, because not everybody agrees that Gentile ownership of land removes sanctity, and therefore by extension all of the halachos that are relevant and shaykh to agriculture. Good. Bosei top of Samach Zayin. Next, Gilgul Hekdish Poter. Listen to this. What happens if halacha l'maisa, Gilgul Hekdish, let's say you have a dough, and that dough was needed while it belonged, needed meaning with a K, it was needed while it belonged to the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Poter. It is poter from Chal. But remember again, yesterday we established two different important pieces in the timeline. For when it comes to, when it comes to grain, so when does grain would become obligated in Meiser? When? A miruach, at the time that the pile is smoothed. Right? That's when it becomes subject to obligations of Trumas and Meisrus. When is a dough subject to the halachas of challah? When the actual dough is needed. When it's needed is when it becomes subject to the halachos of challah. So we'll say, therefore, in this case over here, what's happening? The dough belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. It is being needed when it is property of the Beis HaMikdash. What's the halacha? It's pater. Because we both say a dough that is property of the Beis HaMikdash is not subject to the halachos of challah. Remember again, any temple property is exempt from trumos and maestros, including challah. This nan, because we say we learned hikdishi sasachlo gilgalo padasa chayiv. Also, listen to this case. If a person went ahead and consecrated his dough, I have a dough, I consecrated it, achlo gilgalo, and I did not need the dough. Second line, samach zayin amad aleph. I did not need the dough. Upadasa, and then I redeem the dough. And then I will say, so what happens is I makdish it before I need it, and I redeem it before I need it. So when I need it, again with the K, it's once again my personal property. Chayaves. So ultimately, again, it is subject to the laws of challah. As I will say, the determinant is if at the moment that I'm needing the dough, if it's my property, subject to challah. If it's Beis HaMikdash property, it's not subject to challah. Mishe gilgala upedasa, both if I needed it and then consecrated it and then subsequently redeemed it, chayaves. The dough is chayav in challah. Why? Because at the time that it was needed, it was my personal property. Hikdisha adshelo gilgala. If I was makdish the dough before I needed it, the Gilgala HaGizbar, and the Gizbar, which I will say again, it doesn't really matter who, but the point is, it was needed at the time that it was temple property. Va'achar kach padasa, and only then did I redeem it. What's the halacha? Pitura. The dough is pater from challah. Why? Shebishas chuvasa haisa pitura. Because it will say at the time that it became chayiv in challah, i.e. at the time that the dough was needed, it was temple property. Because it was temple property, ultimately, again, it is pater from challah. Fine. So we'll say, so again, so you begin to see, so all we're doing over here is we're trying to figure out all the variation of cases, both by miruach as well as by gilgul, as well as by the kneading of the dough. So again, we've just established that for a dough, how do you know if it's subject to challah? Everything depends on ownership at the time of the kneading of the dough. If it's owned by an individual, then halacha l'maisa is subject to challah. If it's owned by the Beis Hamikdash and needed, of course, so to speak, by the Beis Hamikdash, then it is pater from challah. Next case, Bay Rava, Gilgul Ovid Kochalim Mai. I'll say now a very interesting case. What happens if a non-Jew needs the dough? What happens if an akum goes out and needs the dough? What is the status of that dough? Is it subject to challah or not? So my misna tran, so says we learned this. Gershon is gayer. Listen to this interesting case. Person converts. Gershon is gayer. V'hai salo isa, and he converted with his dough. He brought his dough along with him, right into his new Jewish state. Now, so what's the halach? So what's the shaila? What's the shaila? The shaila is his converted dough subject to challah or not? Right, subject to challah or not? So listen to this. Vaislo isa. Listen to this. Naas sa'achlo neskayer potter mission neskayer chayiv. Okay, so it's pretty simple. If he needed the dough before he converted, then what? Then what? Then it's potter. If he needed the dough after he converted, then it's chayiv. Straightforward. Safek. But what if he's not sure? There's a lot going on. He's not sure. Did he need the dough prior to conversion? Did he need the dough after conversion? So he's not sure. So what's the halacha? Chayiv. But say ultimately again, if he's not sure when he needed the dough, then chayiv. Then he has to separate a challah. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says chayiv de l'chumra azlinon. Now true, the reason we say chayiv is because we're being machmir. We're just going to be machmir to tell him to separate out the challah. V'hashta mi boy leila haydi gilgul ovid kochavim pater man katani. So we'll say now watch this. So safek chayiv ha man katanila. So we'll say whose opinion is this? Divrei hakol hi. Now both say now again. So the Brisa answered out pretty much. What's the halacha? Both say. So remember the question we asked was what? The question we asked was what? What happens if a non-Jew goes ahead and needs dough? So is it subject to challah or not? So both say. From this brisa, it's abundantly clear that what's the answer to that question? No. Because remember again, I will say, the brisa said clearly. Now, the brisa was talking about a guy who converted, but it answers our question as well, because what does it say? So we'll call him Avram. Avram converts together along with his dough. So if he needed the dough before he converted, then what? The dough is pater from challah. If he needed the dough after he converted, then the dough is chayiv in challah. If we're not sure when he needed the dough, then the dough will be chayiv in challah. But that's just l'chumra. So we'll say, it seems to be everyone agrees that if a Gentile needs dough, then it is not subject to the laws of challah. To which the Gemara says, everyone agrees with this. To which the Gemara says, "Va'afidu Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda dekamechayvi hasam patriach." And I both say this is amazing. And even Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda, and I both say, now remember again, you'll say to yourself, what's the havamina that Gentile dough would be chayiv in challah? Because also remember again, let's go back to what we said before. Because we saw before the position of Meir Rabbi Yehuda who hold that if a non-Jew goes ahead and smooths out his pile of grain, let's say, what's the status of that grain? It's subject to meiser. Why? Because ein kinyon l'nachri be'eretz Yisrael. Because a non-Jew does not have the ability to acquire property in Eretz Yisrael to the point that they have the ability to what? To go ahead and exempt the agricultural from the necessary trumas and maisros. Now both say, if you hold that way, you could see how what? You could see how maybe even the dough of a Gentile should also be subject to the halachos of challah. To which the Gemara says, even Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda who hold that what? That the grain of a nachri, once he smooths it out, will be subject to trumas and maisros. Even they who hold that will agree that the dough of a nachri is exempt from challah. Why? To which the Gemara says, "Hasam hu dechsev digancha yisera." So we'll say because when it comes to grain, so the pasuk says digancha, your grain twice. That second your grain, we'll say, is an extra pasuk. And remember again, this is lo sucha lecha b'sharecha meiser digancha v'sirosh chavitzarecha. So this is talking about the obligation of meiser. So you can't go ahead and eat in your gates the meiser of your grain. It says digancha twice. That second digancha is extra. That is have miut achar miut. Rabbi say that is a limiting phrase after a limiting phrase. And again, that exegetical principle says in miut achar miut ela l'rabos. We'll say in general, when we have two back-to-back exclusionary or limiting phrases, that comes to include something. What does it come to include? El rabos afilu ovdei kochavim. So we'll say in Rabbi Meir Rabbi Huda's model, the double miyut of the gancha comes to actually include something. What does it come to include? It comes to include the grain of an akum, that an akum in fact is subject to the halachos of meiser. That therefore, again, if an akum goes ahead and smooths out his pile, that grain is now subject to the laws of meiser. However, aval hacha, Rabbi said, when it comes to dough, when it comes to the kneading of the dough and the obligation of challah, aval hacha trei zimni arisosechem ksiv. We'll say it says the word arisosechem, your dough, twice. Chad arisosechem kidei isaschem. So we'll say one arisosechem teaches me that halacha lemaisa. We'll say you're not chayv to separate out challah on any size dough. This is actually very important, right? You need a certain amount of dough in order to go ahead and separate out challah. So that's what I learned from one of those arisosechem. V'chad arisosechem, and one arisosechem teaches me that what? Arisosechem v'lo isas ovdi kochavim v'lo isas kodesh. And I will say one arisosechem teaches me that it is only your dough that is subject to challah, not the dough of an akum, and not the dough that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. So I will say, so therefore, even Rabbi Meir Rabbi Huda, who will say that the grain of an akum, b'shas miruach, once the pile is smooth, will be chayiv in meiser, will agree that the dough of an akum is not subject to the laws of challah. O Dilma, or perhaps you could say as follows: Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Shimon Katanila. Maybe Rabbi say at the end of the day, the opinion who holds that the isa, that the dough of an achri, of an akum, is not subject to the laws of challah, maybe that reflects the view of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Shimon, who hold that the grain of an akum is not subject to meiser either. Tikapatri, I'm sorry, O Dilma, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Shimon Katanila, Tikapatri, Aval Rabbi Meir Rabbi Huda Gamri, Reishis Mihasam. We're supposed to say maybe Rabbi Meir Rabbi Huda, who hold that just like, maybe they will hold that just as the grain of an akum is subject to meiser, so too again the dough of an akum will be subject to challah. How? Maybe they make a gzera shava of reishis between meiser and between challah. Rava, so this is actually amazing. This is an interesting lashon. So Rava says, Yehi Rava da'achzei bichilma. Rava says, I don't know the answer to this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should show me the answer to this in a dream. I'll say, which is an interesting way of saying, we'll say you need siyata dishmaya for everything. You need siyata dishmaya for everything, including, I will say, trying to figure out some of the answers to life's questions. You can't figure it out on your own. Yehi Rava da'achse b'chilma. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, help me with this. Show me the answer to this question in a dream. And I will say, whose opinion is being reflected over here? Hadar Amar Rava. So we'll say Rava came along and Rava said, he must have either he saw it in the dream or he got it. I'll tell you, you see this a lot. This is one of the big differences between, let's say, Sephardic halachic literature and Ashkenazic halachic literature. For example, I will say, if you look at the Ben Yehoyada, right? So the Ben Yehoyada, the Ben Ish Chai, was the chief rabbi of Baghdad. He wrote both halachas as well as Ben Yehoyada's Anagarata. Every single time he goes ahead and he comes forth with the commentary, he always begins in the same exact way, which is B'siyata Dishmaya. B'siyata Dishmaya. What is B'siyata Dishmaya? Whereas I'm going to give an explanation, but my explanation is only possible because HaKadosh Baruch Hu put this knowledge in my head. Without the Ribono Shel Olam having placed this idea in my mind, it would not be there. It's very, even before you get into what he says, there's such a musar in just being able to see that b'siyata d'shmaya. It's absolutely beautiful. So Rav is saying, Ribono Shel Olam, show me the answer. Show me the answer. Yehi Rava da'achzei b'chilma. Kadosh Baruch Hu, show me the answer in a dream. So Rava comes back with the answer. Hada Amar Rava, here we go. Man da Amar. We'll say, here's the halacha. Man da Amar miruach ovid kochavim poter, gilgul ha'ovid kochavim poter. We'll say, so Rava links the two concepts. The one who says that ultimately what? The one who says that the smoothing out of the pile of the ovid kochavim paters from meiser will also agree that the kneading of the dough by an akum will also be pater. Man da'amar meirach ovid kochavim eino poter, gilgula ovid kochavim eino poter. So we'll say, Rava says the two are linked. In other words, we'll say Meruach and Gilgul are two sides of the same coin. So in other words, if you hold that when the akum smooths the pile, therefore again the produce is not subject to meiser. Why? Because yesh kinyan la'akum be'eretz Yisrael, and therefore again if the akum owns it, it's not subject to meiser. Therefore you will also hold that what? That the dough of an akum, once he needs it, will also not be subject to the laws of challah. On the flip side, if you hold that the pile of grain of the akum is subject to the laws of meiser, then what? Then you will also hold that the dough of an akum is subject to the laws of challah. Rava seems to say that pretty much all of this is linked to the concept, ultimately, doesn't akum have kinyan in Eretz Yisrael or not? If he has kinyan in Eretz Yisrael, then ultimately, again, all of the halachos concerning agriculture and by extension challah will fall away. If he doesn't have a kinyan, then by definition, the halachos of meiser will apply to his pile, and the halachos of challah ultimately will apply to his dough. Eisi Rav Papa the Rava. So Rav Papa raised the kasha against Rava. Ovid kochavim shivrish peter chamor v'chala. If an ovid kochavim will say, let's say ovid kochavim will say, halacha is firstborn donkey has kedusha. So let's say the ovid kochavim went in and separated his peter chamor. He went in and separated his firstborn donkey. Blessings, give it to the Kohen, or challah, or he separated a challah. What's the halacha? Modiyim also shu pater. Also, we tell him, by the way, akum, you don't have to do this. Right, your pater, you don't have any din of peter chamor. Right, you don't have any din of challah. Right, so pater v'challah so ne'achalas lazarim. His challah, quote unquote, his challah in quotations could be eaten by anyone. Right, upeter chamor goes is va'ovid bo. The peter chamor, enjoy it. Right, enjoy it. You could shear it. I guess you could shear. Yeah, you could shear it. I was supposed to say, if you separated if you redeemed it with a lamb, you redeemed it with the sheep. So both the chamor as well as the sheep, I will say, are totally unconsecrated. They're chulin, right? You can do whatever you want with it. Ha chumaso asura. They're both saying, what can you infer from here? You can infer from here that ultimately, again, it sounds like it's only the challah of an akum and the peter chamor of an akum that doesn't have kedusha. But if he smoothed out his pile, ultimately, again, the truma would be asura. Also, look at Rashi. Ha truma so asura. Dimerucho eino poter kimidabina leel mimiut achar miut. So what it sounds like, however, is that if we separated out trumas and meiser, or trumas pile of grain, that would be valid trumas and meiser. Both say, why are we making that? Why are we inferring that? Because we'll say if it was true, then you should include it in this list. Because list seems to be the tithing items that if an akum did it are essentially irrelevant. If he separated out a peter chamor, if he separated challah, it's chulin, it's nothing. The fact that his trumas and meisros are not included in this list seems to indicate to us that if he separated out trumas and meisros from his pile, that would be a valid separation. Apparently, because merucha meruach, that ultimately, again, his piling, his smoothing out of the pile of the grain, in fact, makes his grain obligated. V'haitana dar miruach ovikochavim eno poter. So we'll say, this Tana would say that the smoothing out of the pile by an akum does not exempt the pile from trumas and meisros, and yet the gilgul oved kochavim poter. So we'll say, you just wanted to link, Rava just wanted to link what? Smoothing of the pile and challah together. That if you hold that you're chayiv in the smoothing of the pile, then you're going to be chayiv in challah. And if you're patur with the smoothing of the pile, then you're patur in challah. Yet we see that what? We are disassociating the two. That apparently this opinion holds that the dough of an akum is not subject to the laws of challah. Yet what? When he smooths his pile, that pile becomes subject to the laws of trumas and maestras. To which the Gemara says, "Va'odesi Ravina l'Rava." Ravina raised another kasha to Rava. Chalas ovid kochavim ba'aretz. So we'll say if ovid kochavim separates chal and Eretz Yisrael, utrumasa b'chutz la'aretz, or if he separates out trumas and meistros in chutz la'aretz, what's the halacha? Modian oso shehu pater. We tell him, by the way, you're pater. V'chalaso ne'achalas lezarim. Utshrei, and the halacha is that if the chal that is separate, it can be eaten by anyone. Utshrumaso ino medamas. And I will say, if his truma gets mixed in, it does not with chulin, it doesn't cause a problem. I will say, what can you infer from this? Ha trumasa ba'aretz asura. Umidamaz, you can infer from Rabbi say that's what? That if he separated out Truma in Eretz Yisrael, it would be problematic. So we'll say once again, you see that halacha lemaisa, that according to this opinion, if a ovid kochavim smooths the pile of his grain, it is in fact subject to the laws of Trumas and Maestros. Yet what? If he separates challah, or when he kneads his dough, the dough is not subject to challah. So we'll say, so essentially what we're doing is Rava came along and Rava wanted to link the two. Rava says that whoever holds that the pile of grain smoothed by an akum is subject to the laws of Trumas and Maestros will also agree that what? That his dough is subject to challah. And if you hold that the pile is not subject to Trumas and Maestros, so the dough will not be chayiv in challah. To which the Gemara says, you see it's pashut not true. You see, I both say that there are schools of thought out there that say what? That who hold that when an akum smooths his pile, the pile will be subject to Trumos and Maestros. Yet what? Yet what? His dough will not be subject to challah. So how do you reconcile? We'll say, how do you disentangle those two? Here we go. To which the Gemara answers, we'll say one word, midrabanan. Midrabanan. When we say that halacha lemaisa, his pile of grain is subject to Trumas and Maestros, we'll say, that is not a biblical obligation, but rather what? That is a rabbinic obligation. We always say this is actually fascinating. Look at Rashi, midrabanan. Here we go. Kilomar li olam hadik tani legabe chala gilgul pater hanach tanaihi depatri le'el b'miruach v'hadik tani le'el midukya hat shumas truma midrabanan havi aser. We'll say, in fact, the halacha is that if you hold that the dough is exempt from challah, you'll also hold that the pile of grain is exempt from Trumas and Maestros. Yet, what Rabbi say, even those who hold that the dough is exempt from challah will agree that midrabanan, the pile of grain is subject to Trumas and Maestros. Why would you do that? We'll say this is amazing. Gzeira mishum ba'alei kisim. We'll say this was a gzeira because of the rich people. Ba'alei kisim means the people with large pockets. What's the pshat? We'll say, look at Rashi. This is amazing. Rashi says over here, Vishor ba'alei kisim ashirim shalochin tvura mechamorim v'yishar z'lokech min ovi kachom shlo yaser demiruach ovi kom poter. Actually, skip to Lishnach Rino. Mishul Bali Kisin, Sheshe Kakos Harbe, Vichasan Rov Maestros, Viaknulo Ovekochavim, Viamrichum Ovekcham Mafkim Maestros. Listen to this. The first tax shelter. The first tax shelter, we'll say, watch this. Actually, it's a great chap. What's the chap? We'll say, I have a lot of land, Baruch Hashem. I have a lot of land, which means I have a very hefty Trumas and Maestros bill. Don't get me wrong, I love Kohanim, right? I'm all for spreading the wealth. You know what I'm also for? Get a job, right? Get your own Trumas and Maestros. So I have a great chap, so that's my great chap. So when I go ahead and harvest my field, I'm going to, quote unquote, sell my fields to an akum. I'm going to sell my fields to an akum. I'm going to say, akum, listen, it's yours. Right up until when? Right after Shas Miruach. Right after the smoothing of the pile. Right after the smoothing of the pile, I'm going to, quote unquote, buy it back from you. What's the beauty of that? The beauty of that is that halacha l'maisa, according to this opinion, if it's owned by the akum at the Shas Miruach, it's not subject to Trumas and Maestros. So therefore, again, I'm going to sell the land to the akum, buy it back right after Shas Miruach. And also remember again, as we've seen, Meiser identity is locked in at Shas Miruach. Whatever your identity is at the time of the smoothing of the pile, that's the identity going forward. So when I buy the grain back after the piles have been smoothed, that produce is forever exempt from Trumos and Maestros. Let's say it is a totally legal loophole. It is a totally legal loophole. In other words, I'm just using the halacha to my benefit. So the rabbis didn't like this, and the rabbis don't. So we'll say, obviously, also, you actually can't have it. You have to penalize the person for this, because we'll say, at the end of the day, the system is that this is how Shevet Levi exists. Remember, again, Shevet Levi does not own real estate, or at least does not have a formal tribal portion. They subsist on the Trumos and Maestros. If you allow these legal loopholes, you're going to get into a... Remember, we'll say, the beauty of our system is built in a way to be able to take care of everyone. So the moment that you use legal loopholes in the system is the moment that, so fine, if you have the tax shelter, so then the mice, again, that burden is just going to shift somewhere else in the community, and it's just going to have to be borne by the community in a different way. The rabbis did not want that. Therefore, what? Midrabanan. So we'll say, even though it appears that halacha lemaisa, when an akum smooths the pile, we'll say, what's the status of the pile? What's the status of the pile? It is meiser exempt. It is meiser exempt, but midrabanan we say it is not meiser exempt in order to create a disincentive for the Baalei Kisim, for the rich people, to shift their property to the Akum for the Shas Miruach. If that's the case, Chalanami. So we'll say, I don't understand. Why don't you make that? So we'll say, so now what we have over here is as follows. Everyone agrees that Chala needed by an Akum is going to be pater from Chala. And even though, again, Me'ikar Adin, when the grain is smooth, when the grain is smooth by an Akum, it's pater from Shumas Maisos, we make it Chayev Midrabanan in Shumas Maisos. Why don't you say the same thing by Chala? So why don't you put a rabbinic penalty by Chala also and say that what? Anytime the dough is needed by the Chala, anytime the dough is needed by the Akum, so halacha l'maisa, you should have to take Chala from that dough, because again, let's make a gzir, let's make a rabbinic decree, because we're afraid that what's going to happen, people are going to transfer large amounts of dough to the Akum in an effort to avoid the Chala obligation, to which the Gemara says, I'll tell you why that's not going to happen, because afilu efshar da'afalei pachos mechamesh riva'im kemach. But we'll say, listen, if you don't want to take Chala, there's a much easier loophole. What's the much easier loophole, Bosai? Need a smaller batch of dough. Remember again, Bosai, in other words, I don't need any major. In other words, the halacha is that you're only obligated to separate challah if you need a dough of a certain size. If you're just not interested in giving challah, that's fine. Meaning that actually is your prerogative. You could just need a smaller batch of challah. So we'll say, so because of that, people aren't going to start transferring dough to Akum to avoid the Chala obligation. Because again, if you want to avoid the Chala obligation, it's easy enough. Just make a smaller batch. To which the Gemara says, Va'od, Trumanami efshar da'avlek Rabbi Yoshia. We'll say furthermore again, by Truma there's another legal loophole. What's the other legal loophole? Dan Rabbi Yoshia, Ma'arim Adam al Tfuaso, Umachnitza b'mot shala. Kedei shete behemta ocheles, Uptura min ha-meiser. We'll say, remember again, the Meiser obligation on produce only applies at the time when the produce is quote-unquote finished. So we'll say, so from an agricultural perspective, the produce is quote-unquote finished when the pile is smooth. Therefore, technically speaking, if a person wants to go ahead and bring the produce into his house, b'mot shala, in its husk, so a person can bring it in, could feed it to his animal, and technically speaking, the produce will become pater from meiser. Inami da'ayole derech gagos v'derech karfifios. We'll say furthermore, if you bring the produce into your home in a non-normative way, you lower it in through the roof, or you bring it in through the terraced area, so we'll say the halacha is it becomes meiser exempt as well, to which the Gemara is saying, I don't understand. There are plenty of ways in which a person could avoid the meiser obligation if he so chooses. So why do you think you're avoiding the problem if you go ahead and you penalize the guy who is transferring his produce to an akum? To which the Gemara says, no, let's take a step back. To which the Gemara says, Hasam bifar hesya zela be'milsa. Hacha b'tzina lo zela be'milsa. We'll say, take a look at Rashi. Hasam b'mos u'b'derech gagos far hesya zela milsa. Shon ploni marim l'miftar ma'aser. Yochach avidu lu'ai de'ovdek chav b'tzina. We'll say, listen to this. See, I will say, you're right. Are there multiple ways to avoid meiser obligations? Yes. But I will say, these are very public things. When people see me bringing in truckloads of produce into my home in the husk, they're going to say, what are they going to say? What a Jew. Right? What they're going to say is, it's clear what I'm doing. It's clear what I'm doing, right? I'm clearly trying to go ahead and skirt my meiser obligation. We'll say, so that's embarrassing. But what can I do? We'll say, but what I can do that no one will know about is what? Is I can go ahead and I can sell my property to a non-Jew. Now, no one's going to know that. So because I will say that is a way for me to skirt my meiser obligation without anyone knowing it, that's when the rabbis stepped in. And the rabbi said, no, we are not going to allow you to avail yourself of that legal loophole. Even if you sell your produce to an akum, it is still going to be subject to meiser. And therefore, I will say what that means is, when I subsequently buy it back, because remember the whole chap of this, I will say, is a buyback. The chap of this is I'm going to sell it to him before it becomes obligated in Meiser. I want him to own it at the moment that it becomes obligated in Meiser. Therefore, again, in my cheshbon, it's not going to be obligated in Meiser. I'm going to buy it back afterwards. And essentially, what I bought back is what? Non-tithable produce. To which the rabbi said, no, you didn't. We're stepping in over here, and what we are going to say is that even if you sold it to an akum, the produce is still subject to trumos and maisros. So even though the akum owned it as shas miruach, ultimately, again, you're still going to be chayiv. Therefore, I will say the Gemara says, "Hasam says in this case over here, where I'm selling it to an akum, so therefore, Allah said it's quiet, no one knows about it, it's not embarrassing. Therefore, I will do it, and therefore, the rabbis felt the need to step in and ultimately, again, legislate against this case. So, what comes out over here is as follows. What comes out is that halacha l'maisa, will say the way we paskin is first of all, if an akum needs a dough, that dough is not subject to the laws of challah. I was talking about, right, that everyone seems to agree with. What about Gentile ownership of property at the Shas Miruach? Shabbos again, that's a machlokes. It appears that the halacha l'maisa really is that an akum ultimately, again, the produce of an akum is not subject to shumas and maisus, but it is subject midirabanan. That ultimately, again, even if you hold that midoraisa, it is not. So remember, there's a machlokes. The fundamental machlokes of if the property of an akum is subject to trumos and maisus or not is rooted in a much more fundamental machlokes of does an akum have a kinyan in Eretz Yisrael or not. And if an akum has a kinyan, then he could remove kedushas haaretz from his produce. If he doesn't have a kinyan, then he cannot remove kedushas haaretz from produce. So we'll say that's a machlokes. But it appears that even if you hold that an akum does have the ability to remove kedushas haaretz from his produce, still midrabanan, his produce will be chayiv in shumos and maisros. Why? To disincentivize a rich person from going in and selling his produce to an akum, so that it can be owned by an akum at the shas miruach, and therefore become exempt from shumos and maisros. Good. Mishnah. Balo l'isar. We'll say back to the Karban HaOmer. Balo l'isar. So we'll say now. Remember, at this point in time, this is very exciting because we've been going through the entire step by step with the Karban HaOmer. So at this point in time, I've harvested 3 se'in of barley. I've now sifted that enough that what do I have? I have 1 isaron of fine barley flour. 1 isaron of fine barley flour. Now what do I do with it? Balo isaron nasan alav shmano. I put the oil on the isaron. Ulevon nasa, as well as the levona, the frankincense. Yatzak, I pour it on. Ubalal, I mix it all together. Vihigish, and ultimately I bring it near the mizbeach. Kamatz, I take the kmitza. Vihiktir, and I burn the kmitza on the mizbeach. Vashar ne'echa l'kohanim. And ultimately, again, the rest of sirosais, remember again, even of the isaron of the barley flour, only a kmitza of that is offered up on the mizbeach. What happens to the rest of it? The rest of it ultimately, again, is ne'echa l'kohanim. It's consumed by the kohanim. Rabbi say this is actually amazing. Mishakar, Rabbi say, now understand, what is the primary function of the Karban HaOmer? The Karban HaOmer is matir chadash. Right? Remember, chadash means, we'll say, just for illustration purposes. Let's say now it's going to be Pesach 5779. Any produce that has grain, that has grown from Pesach 5778 until Pesach 5779, that is called chadash. That produce may not be consumed until when? Until the Karban HaOmer of 5779. The moment that the Karban HaOmer of 5779 is offered, all of the produce that grew between last Pesach and this Pesach now becomes mutter. It's no longer chadash, rather it is called yashan. So we'll say, now watch this. Once they offered up the Omer, this is amazing. Yotzin, so we'll say something amazing happened. The moment they offered up the Karban HaOmer inside the Beis HaMikdash, Yotzin, you would go outside, Umotzin shuki Yerushalayim shehu malei kamach kali. We'll say something amazing happened, which is the moment they offered up the Karban HaOmer, if you walked into the marketplace in Yerushalayim, what would you find? The marketplace was filled with grain. Well, kamach kali literally means roasted flour, right? Roasted. It means, what they're saying, the produce was already out. The grain was already out, which tells you what they're saying. Which tells you what? They had already harvested it and prepared it even before when? Even before the offering of the Omer. Now, it wasn't put out for sale until ultimately the Karban Omer was offered. But already the moment they offered the Omer, if you walked out into the marketplace, the produce was out. The Yashan was out. And the Mishnah says, Shelo birtzon chacham divrei meir. The Chachamim did not like this. What were the Chachamim concerned? I'll say quickly, look at Rashi. Second wine line, Rashi. Shelo birtzon chachamim. Rashi says, first of all, look at Rashi. Mishkar Omer miyad kishiyotzim motzin shuki Yerushalayim maleos kemach v'kali mitfuah chadasha. The moment they offered up the Omer, if you went into the marketplace, you would find it filled with kemach, with grain, with roasted grain from the new crop. Shelo b'ritzon chacham, Rashi says, the gazrinan shema yochal kishi yiktzar v'yochal chadash kodem ha'omer v'zeh shakvaro kemach vaday niktzar kodem ha'omer. So it's like the Chum didn't like this because the Chum were generally concerned. We don't want you doing anything with the produce until when? Until after the Omer is offered. What are we concerned about? That you're going to end up eating chadash. Rabbi Yehuda Omer birtzon chachamim hayu osin. Rabbi Yehuda says, nah, it's okay. The rabbis were totally fine with this. They did not have a problem. So I will say, so one thing we know for sure historically is that at the moment the Omer was offered, you went outside the next moment, and Baruch Hashem, the marketplaces were full. Did the rabbis like this process, this practice or not? We'll stop over here for today. Let me pick up with the Gemara tomorrow. Boom. Everything is ready. Whatever it is. I know that I owe you an answer. Yeah, I'm sorry. All good. I have your copy. Take it off now. Yes. No, you're yours. You don't have to look for them. I'm taking them off now. I had it down. I did the consumer board. So I have to be there by 7:15 or 7. Wait, yeah.